I have a question for you. How can we make sure we have a successful day? More about that just after the amazing intro. Wow. The Day One Journey, episode 63. Cha-ching. Yes, I remind you, this is the nightly routine. Last episode, we suggested an effective way to plan the day. What did we do? We thought about an outcome. We imagined that as a picture, and then we put it inside the timeline, and then we lived through the day. So today, we give another tip how to make sure that tomorrow, remember this is the nightly routine, so I speak about tomorrow. How can we make sure tomorrow is a successful day? Let's take a walk. Let's take a walk and talk about that. Cha-ching. So how can we make sure? This is all about choosing what's that outcome. What's that one outcome that we choose? And then we make a commitment. But now, let's dive right in. Are you ready? Are you ready to dive right in? Let's do that. I present you another question. What's the one thing that you can do tomorrow? Remember, this is the nightly routine. We talk about tomorrow. Again, the question. What can you do? What's the one thing that you can do tomorrow such that by doing that, everything else will be easier or even unnecessary? Yeah, that's the question. What can you do tomorrow? The one thing, such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or even unnecessary. That's a very powerful question, and that's the leading question. So you ask yourself that question, you think about it, and then you think about one outcome. Then you can use the other strategy that we said yet last time. You have the image, you imagine that, you put that in the day and go through that. But watch the previous episode for that. So you have that thing that you want to do. The one thing that can make everything else easier or even unnecessary. So you take that thing, this is my suggestion to you, this is what I'm doing to make sure I win the day. How can I make sure I win the day? I define success. How can you win the day? How can you make the day more successful? How can you make sure the next day is a successful day if you didn't define it? Cha-ching. That's the key. Let's define it. Yeah, let's define it. How you define that? You ask yourself, what's the one thing that I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? Then you have an answer. You take that answer and you make it a commitment. But you also decide that if you do that, that's a successful day. You set yourself to win the day. That's the key thing. You define yourself what success looks like. Now, you might say, I have more things I want to do in this day. Amazing. What I do, I define these as bonuses. Meaning, I have the one thing that I'm committed to. If I've done that, that's a successful day. I define it in a way so it will be easier for me to win the day. Maybe more about that in the next episode. But I have that one thing. I have more things I want to do. I define them as bonuses. So, I ask myself the question again, what's the one thing that I can do such that by doing that, everything else will be easier or even unnecessary? I make that the commitment. If I have more stuff I want to do, I define them as bonuses. And then I know if I do the commitment, that's a successful day. So I know I make the rules of the game. I make it clear for me. How can I win the day? Does it make sense? So that's the key thing I want to emphasize in this episode. This is what I do every day, and I set myself for success. This is the only way, at least for me, that I can make sure I win the day. I define what success looks like, because it can be very very not tangible if you don't define it. You need to define it. That's the key. Next episode, we'll probably understand how to choose that one thing to make it easier for us to win the day. But we're out of time. So back to you. If this is the morning, you can do that exercise, this exercise for this day. Ask yourself, what's the one thing that you can do such that by doing that, everything else will be easier or even unnecessary? Think about that one thing. Make sure it's not too difficult. Decide about this thing and say to yourself, if I do that, that's a successful day. So if that's the morning, this is the morning, you see that video, this video, pick a thing for today. If you see this video in the evening, do the same thing for tomorrow. Remember, the best time to plan the day is the day before. Amazing. So do that. And until tomorrow, have an amazing. Yeah, day one. Meet you tomorrow.